My stepson offered a massage at the retreat, but what he said after sent chills down my spine. I was exhausted, alone in the silence. He touched my shoulder and whispered the unexpected. Not because it was wrong, but because I couldn't deny the way I felt. There's a particular kind of tired no amount of sleep can fix. That's how I felt the morning we left for the retreat. My body moved, but my soul lagged behind, dragging like wet clothes in a suitcase. I didn't want to go, God knows I didn't. But everything was already booked. Tyler insisted, said it'd be good for me. Just a few days away. He said, some quiet, you need it. He wasn't wrong. Ever since the divorce, the house had been full of silence but never peace. My ex had moved on faster than I thought humanly possible. New city. New woman, new life, and I just stayed still. Half alive, half here. I never meant for Tyler to stay this long. He was supposed to crash on the couch while job hunting after college. But weeks bled into months. At first, I braced myself for awkwardness. He's my ex's son. After all, but Tyler turned out to be the only person who asked me how I was, and actually listened. He wasn't a boy anymore. He carried himself with a calmness that made everything feel less frantic. He cooked sometimes, stacked the dishes without being asked, noticed when I was about to cry but didn't want to be seen. There was something grounding about having him around, safe, in a way I hadn't felt in years. So I said yes to the retreat. The cabin was deep in the hills, surrounded by tall pines and fog that curled against the windows like whispers. The kind of place that made you feel small, but in a good way, like the world would keep turning even if you stopped moving for a while. We arrived in the late afternoon. I unpacked in slow motion, each folded shirt reminding me how exhausted I'd become from pretending to be okay. My shoulders ached, my lower back throbbed. I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd ignored. Tyler made dinner that night: simple pasta, garlic bread, wine. I barely tasted any of it. My body was there, nodding and smiling at the right moments. But inside, I was unraveling. And when he asked if I wanted to watch a movie, I said no. I just needed to sit with the quiet. But the thing about quiet is, it doesn't always soothe. Sometimes it makes you hear the ache louder. And mine was screaming. The next morning, I woke to the soft sound of rain tapping against the cabin windows. For a moment, I just lay there wrapped in blankets, unsure if my body could carry me through another day. Everything still ached, my back, my shoulders, even my hands. I made my way to the kitchen, barefoot on cold wood floors. Tyler was already there. He stood by the stove, barefoot too, wearing a plain white t-shirt and flannel pajama pants. He looked peaceful, like someone who didn't carry the kind of heaviness I woke up with every morning. You okay? He asked without turning, just sensing. I opened my mouth to say yes, but what came out was a tired sigh. My back's killing me, I admitted. He glanced over his shoulder, eyes soft. Want me to work on it for you? I blinked. What? Your back. I could try to help. You look like you're carrying the whole world back there. His voice wasn't flirty. It was gentle, familiar, and for some reason, that made it even harder to say no. I didn't answer right away, just stared at him, at the kindness on his face, at how easy he made it sound, like it was no big deal to offer his hands to the woman who used to be his stepmother. Finally, I nodded. Just the shoulders, I said quickly, already regretting how unsure I sounded. He smiled, not smug, just warm. Whatever you need. And that was the moment. The first crack in the wall I'd spent years building. Not because he touched me. Not yet. But because for the first time in a long time, someone saw I was hurting. And wanted to help. I sat on the edge of the couch, trying not to overthink it. Tyler grabbed a pillow, placed it behind my back, then knelt behind me with a folded blanket under his knees. He didn't ask me to shift or remove anything, just slid his hands gently over my shoulders, slow and deliberate, like he was being careful not to startle me. The first touch sent a ripple through my chest. Not from pain, though my muscles were stiff and tender, but from the sudden awareness of being touched at all. I hadn't realized how long it had been since someone's hands were on me in any caring way. His thumbs moved in small, steady circles near the base of my neck. Firm, but not aggressive. I let my head drop forward just slightly, more out of instinct than permission. My breath slowed, my eyes closed. "You're so tense," he murmured, almost like he was speaking to himself. I didn't respond, didn't know how. The way he said it wasn't critical, it wasn't even concerned. Really, just noticing. And somehow that made my skin burn more than anything else could have. There was no rush in his movements. No awkward small talk, just silence, rain on the windows, and the soft rhythm of his hands working into the knots that had lived in my shoulders for months, maybe years. At one point, his fingers grazed the side of my neck, and I felt myself flinch, not out of discomfort, but because the intimacy of it startled me. I shifted slightly, hoping he hadn't noticed. He did. "Sorry," he whispered, pulling back a little. "That okay?" I nodded, but I couldn't find my voice. There was a heat spreading across my chest that had nothing to do with the firewood crackling nearby. I felt exposed, but not in a way that made me want to hide. I felt seen, and seen in a way that I didn't know how to handle. Then he said it so soft. I almost missed it. "You shouldn't have to carry everything alone." My heart stuttered. It was the kind of thing you say to someone you love. Not out of romance, but out of something deeper, something protective. That's when I knew something had shifted. Maybe not between us, not yet, but definitely inside me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt his hands again. Not in a lurid way, nothing about it had been wrong. Not exactly, but in a way that lingered. A way that made me question what had actually happened. It was just a massage. He was just being kind. But something about it felt different. Too tender, too aware. And maybe it wasn't even him, maybe it was me. The way my breath caught when he leaned in. The way I almost leaned back into him without meaning to. I stared at the ceiling. The shadows from the fireplace flickering along the wood-paneled walls. My mind wouldn't settle. My body felt both heavier and more alive than it had in years. Was I imagining it? Had I mistaken simple kindness for something else? Or worse, had I wanted it to be something else? That question haunted me. Because somewhere deep inside, I already knew the answer. I didn't want to admit it, not even to myself, but I had felt something. Not just comfort, not just relief, but a dangerous kind of warmth. One that crept into my chest and stayed there, humming low and steady. I thought about his words, "You shouldn't have to carry everything alone." They weren't romantic, not overtly, but they were personal, intimate, the kind of words you offer when you've seen someone at their breaking point and want to be the one who helps them stand. And I let him in, even if just for a moment. That scared me more than anything. Because I'd built walls for a reason. I'd survived because of them. And yet here I was touched. Unraveled, aching in ways I didn't have language for. I wasn't supposed to feel this way. Not about him. But I did. And I didn't know what to do with that. The second night at the cabin felt colder than the first. I wrapped myself in a thick cardigan and curled up on the armchair by the fire, clutching a mug of lukewarm tea I hadn't touched in over an hour. The silence between us wasn't awkward, just thick. Weighted, like neither of us wanted to be the one to break it. Tyler sat on the rug, scrolling through a book he'd pulled from the shelf. His hair was still damp from the shower. The light from the fire played shadows across his face, softening his jaw, warming the quiet way he moved. There was nothing loud about him, nothing forceful, and yet, everything about his presence filled the space. At one point, I glanced over, and he was already looking at me. "You okay?" he asked, voice low. I nodded, just tired. "You've been tired for a long time," he said, not accusing, just stating what he saw. I didn't reply. I couldn't, because it was true. I wasn't just tired. I was emptied, hollowed out by years of trying to be fine. He set the book down and leaned back on his hands. "You want to sit here?" he asked, motioning toward the rug in front of the fire. "Might help warm you up." I hesitated, then set my mug aside and lowered myself to the rug. Legs crossed, back facing him. It was quiet except for the crackling wood. I could feel the warmth radiating from him even before he shifted closer. "Back again?" he asked softly. I nodded. He didn't ask for more, just placed his hands on my shoulders and began again, same slow, steady pressure. But this time, it felt different, or maybe I was different. There was a closeness now that hadn't been there before, a slowness in the air. My breathing shallowed. I felt the hem of my cardigan shift slightly as his fingers moved lower, tracing the edges of my shoulder blades, pausing where tension still lived. Then, without warning, he leaned in just a little, his breath near my ear. "You don't have to be strong right now," he whispered. I froze. Every nerve in my body fired at once. "I see you," he added. And just like that, the air changed. I didn't move, didn't speak. His hands stilled on my back. Waiting, measured, uncertain. My heartbeat roared in my ears. I turned just slightly, just enough to see him in my peripheral vision. His expression was unreadable, soft, open, not predatory, but undeniably close. "Tyler," I whispered, unsure what I meant to follow it with. He didn't flinch. "Yeah?" I opened my mouth, then closed it. My throat was dry. Everything in me screamed to stand, to shut it down, to remind both of us who we were, what we were. But my body didn't move. I didn't feel fear, I felt known. His hand moved just once, tracing a slow line from my shoulder to the middle of my back. Not a touch meant to provoke. A question, one I hadn't been asked in a long, long time. I exhaled shakily. "We shouldn't." "I know." He pulled back immediately, hands retreating like they'd crossed a line he hadn't meant to. The space between us returned. But it wasn't empty, it was buzzing. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, avoiding my eyes. I shook my head. "You don't have to be." Neither of us looked at the other. We just stared into the fire, pretending the moment had passed. But it hadn't. And we both knew it. The next morning came early, though I hadn't really slept. I'd closed my eyes, but my mind never settled. It looped back to the firelight, the feel of his breath near my ear, the heat in my chest that hadn't been there in years. I stayed in bed longer than I should have, listening to the creak of floorboards as Tyler moved quietly through the cabin. The scent of coffee drifted in from the kitchen, familiar, steady, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. When I finally stepped out, Tyler was at the stove, back turned, pouring coffee into 2 mugs. He looked over when he heard me, gave a small smile, tight, polite, and nothing like the night before. "Morning," he said. "Morning," I echoed, voice thin. He slid a mug toward me across the counter. "I wasn't sure how you take it." I nodded, took the mug, didn't sip. The silence between us was louder than it had ever been. We didn't talk about it. Not the fire, not what he said, not what almost happened. It hung in the air, an invisible shape neither of us dared name. And somehow, that made it worse. The rest of the day played out like a stage performance. We cleaned the cabin, packed, folded linens like 2 people who'd just met. Every time our hands accidentally brushed, we both flinched like we'd touched a live wire. Tyler kept a careful distance, eyes never lingering, words clipped at the edges. Once, while rinsing dishes, I caught his reflection in the window, his jaw tight, eyes tired. He wasn't unaffected, I could see it, but he was holding it in just as much as I was. I wanted to say something, anything. "I'm sorry," felt wrong. "Did you mean it?" felt worse. So I said nothing. And neither did he. That night, I lay in bed listening to the wind tap the windows. I kept waiting to hear his footsteps, to feel a knock on my door. But the house stayed quiet. No firelight, no whispers, no warmth. Just a steady cold that settled in my chest and refused to leave. And I realized something that made my stomach twist. It wasn't the almost that haunted me. It was how badly I'd wanted it to happen. The silence didn't break when we got back home, it followed us. Tyler brought the bags in, left them by the door, then muttered something about checking on job leads and disappeared into the back room. I stood in the kitchen, keys still in hand, staring at the groceries I never got around to unpacking before we left. Everything looked the same, but nothing felt right. I wanted to rewind to the moment before the fire, before his hands, before his words, not because I regretted it, but because I couldn't stop thinking about it. I walked around the house like a stranger. Every corner reminded me of what didn't happen, and what almost did. I kept trying to talk myself out of it, convince myself it was just a moment. Just exhaustion, just misplaced affection, but that wasn't the truth. The truth was quieter, and heavier. The truth was, I'd felt something real. Something terrifying. Because he wasn't just a boy with kind eyes and gentle hands. He was someone who saw me when I was invisible to the world, including myself. He didn't flinch when I broke. He didn't pity me. He sat beside me, listened to the silence between my words, and said the one thing no one else had. You don't have to carry everything alone. That broke something in me. And I don't know if I'm grateful or resentful. A few days passed. We kept our distance, more out of fear than respect. He left early. I stayed up late, and the words we didn't say filled the room louder than any conversation could. But sometimes, when I walked past his door, I wondered if he was awake too. Wondered if he remembered how close we came. Wondered if he still wanted to. And that's the part one can't admit out loud. Because deep down, beneath the guilt, beneath the ache, beneath all the lines I swore I'd never cross, I know I wanted it too. Not the act, not the betrayal, but the connection, the safety, the warmth. I wanted to feel like someone looked at me and didn't see a mother. Or a failure. Or a woman holding it all together with duct tape and breath mints. I wanted to be seen. Wanted to be wanted, for real. And in that cabin, for one impossible moment, I was. Now, every time I hear his footsteps in the hall, my breath catches, not from shame, not from fear, but from a question I can't shake. If he knocked on my door again, would I open it? I don't expect you to understand. Honestly, I'm not even sure I do. I know how this sounds. I know how quickly people will jump to judge. Maybe you already are. Maybe you're shaking your head, calling me weak, selfish, disgusting. But before you lock that door on me, ask yourself something. Have you ever felt invisible? I don't mean unnoticed. I mean, like you're slowly vanishing in plain sight. Like you can scream and cry and ache and still no one looks at you and says, I see you. That's where I was. You'd be surprised what silence does to a woman over time. Not the loud kind, the cold kind. The kind where your needs are small talk. Your pain becomes background noise. And your worth is measured by how much you can carry without complaint. And then someone, anyone, walks in and offers a moment of warmth. A word, a hand on your shoulder, a voice that says, you don't have to do this alone. Tell me, what would you do? I'm not making excuses. I'm not saying what almost happened was right. But it was human. And that's what scares me the most, that something so complicated, so raw, so blurry, could feel so deeply human. This isn't a confession to clear my conscience. It's a warning, maybe, a whisper to the ones who've spent too long being strong, the ones who keep holding their breath through lonely nights. If this could happen to me, it could happen to you. No matter how careful you are, no matter how good you've always been. Because the truth is, emotional hunger doesn't ask permission. It waits, it watches, and one day, it dares to knock. So stay close to the people who see you, really see you. And if you haven't heard this in a while, let me say it now. You are not a ghost. You are not a burden. You are still worth being held. She could have stopped it. That's the thought you can't shake by the end of this story. Not because anything happened, but because something almost did. Because there was a line. And she saw it, felt it, leaned into it, and then just stood there. You watched her hesitate. You watched her ache. You wanted to root for her healing, her independence, her strength. But instead, she let the pain become something dangerous. She let a moment of comfort become a test of boundaries that should have never been touched. He was her stepson. Yes, he was grown. Yes, he was kind. But he was still her family. Still the echo of a marriage she walked away from. And she let him hold her in a way no son, by blood or by name, ever should. What hurts the most is that it didn't happen in a flash of lust. It happened slowly, gently, through kindness, through silence, through everything we tell ourselves is harmless, until it's too late. And maybe that's what makes it worse. She didn't betray her family in one dramatic choice, she betrayed them in a series of tiny ones. She opened the door, she let him in, and she didn't shut it when she still had time. It's hard not to feel disappointed. Not just in her, but in how human this whole thing felt. How easy it was to understand. How easy it is to imagine doing the same. Maybe that's why you're angry. Because deep down, you know that loneliness doesn't knock politely. It breaks in, and if we're not careful, if we don't name it, face it, guard our hearts, it finds us in our weakest moment and whispers. No one will ever know. And in that moment, everything you swore you'd never do suddenly feels possible. There's a difference between doing something wrong and knowing you almost did. One leaves a stain, the other leaves a shadow. I live in the shadow now. It follows me through every ordinary moment. When I fold laundry, when I set the table, when I hear his footsteps in the hallway. It's not what happened that keeps me up at night, it's what nearly did. The almost, the breath before, the heartbeat after. I tell myself I didn't cross a line. I tell myself we didn't do anything. But that's a lie dressed up in technicalities. Because something did happen, maybe not with our hands, but with our hearts, with our eyes, with the space we let collapse between us. He hasn't brought it up. Not once. He still makes coffee in the morning. Still asks if I need anything from the store. He smiles like nothing cracked between us. But I see it. And I think he does too. Sometimes I wonder if he regrets it. Not what he said, but what it awakened in me. What it revealed. Because I can't look at him now without remembering how warm his hands were. Or how steady his voice was when he whispered that I didn't have to be strong. He meant it kindly, I know that, but kindness, when you're starving, can taste like seduction. And I was starving. Not for sex, not for some forbidden thrill. For presence. For touch. For being seen. And when he looked at me, really looked at me, I forgot who I was supposed to be. That's what I hate most about all of this. Not the guilt, not the shame. The fact that part of me still wants to go back to that firelit room and hear him say it again. Slower this time, closer. I know what that says about me. I know what it makes people think. I used to think the same about women like me. I used to judge. I used to swear I'd never be the kind of woman who blurred the lines. But here I am, on the edge of something I can't name. Wanting what I can't have. Loving the way it felt to almost fall. And the worst part? No one suspects a thing. They see me smile. They see me clean the kitchen. Answer the phone. Drive Tyler to a job interview. They see normal. But inside, I haven't stopped replaying that night. And I don't think I ever will.